Racist officer shaved black woman's head. Had no idea. She'd be sitting on the bench. The morning air in Savannah, Georgia was crisp with a trace of jasmine blooming somewhere in the distance. The sun had barely risen when Dr. Aria Lane pulled into the courthouse parking lot. Her black leather shoes stepped out onto the asphalt, her navy suit crisp, her white blouse buttoned all the way up, and her natural coils tucked neatly into a bun beneath a silk wrap. She carried a slim black case and moved with the steady poise of someone who knew exactly who she was and why she was there. No one else knew it yet, though. And that was exactly how she wanted it. She moved toward the main entrance of the Savannah Federal Courthouse, its gray stone facade etched with a century of stories, both righteous and corrupted. Aria didn't flinch when she saw the two security officers standing at the front checkpoint. Her heart beat steadily beneath her ribcage, even as one of them, a tall white man with a square jaw and the kind of crew cut you only see on men with something to prove, took a long step forward. His name was Officer Darren McConnell, and from the moment his eyes locked on her, something shifted. "Ma'am," he said, his tone already dipped in suspicion, "I need you to step aside." Aria blinked. "Is there a problem?" "You're not on the access list for early entry," McConnell replied without checking anything. "Need to verify your reason for being here." She reached calmly into her blazer and pulled out a laminated ID, embossed with the Department of Justice seal. "I have business with the court this morning. Here's my clearance." McConnell barely glanced at it before he snatched it from her hand. He turned it over once, then stuffed it into his jacket pocket. "That doesn't mean you're exempt from secondary screening." "You have no cause to detain me," she said, voice even, "and I will need that ID returned." "Procedure," he said with a smirk. "Let's go." "You're coming with me." She stood her ground. "I am not consenting to a secondary screening without probable cause. You're making this more difficult than it has to be." That was when he stepped behind her, gripped her arm, and led her, pulled her, away from the line of early staffers and visitors beginning to form outside. Some looked on with concern. Most looked away. They passed through a side hallway, cool and dim, before reaching a small room with a single steel chair in the center and a camera in the corner, conveniently turned off. A portable metal detector buzzed softly on standby. A pair of clippers rested on a table near the far wall. Aria's blood ran cold when she saw them. "Have a seat," McConnell said, already donning latex gloves. "I'm not resisting," she replied, standing tall, "but I need your name and badge number." "You'll get all that later," he muttered. "Right now we've got a threat screening protocol to run." "Could be hiding something in that wrap of yours." She stepped back. "My hair is not a threat." He moved closer. "You know what's threatening. Acting like you're above the law." Before she could respond, a second officer stepped into the room. A younger man, nervous, eyes darting toward Aria and then toward McConnell. His badge read Thompson. "She said she doesn't consent, Darren," Thompson said hesitantly. McConnell snapped back, "You want me to write you up for obstruction?" Thompson looked down, said nothing else. That was all the space McConnell needed. He yanked the silk wrap from Aria's head with one hand, and in the other, he powered on the clippers. The buzz filled the room like a live wire. Aria flinched. "You touch me with that, and you're going to regret it." He didn't hesitate. The clippers hit the side of her head, and the first coil of her hair, coils that had taken years to nurture, fell to the floor like a broken promise. The silence was thick. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She sat still. Her voice, when it came, was deadly calm. "I know exactly what you've just done, and you will answer for it." McConnell laughed under his breath. "Lady, Do you even know where you are? I do, she said, eyes locked onto his. The real question is, do you know where I'm going? The second officer couldn't take it anymore. He turned away. She saw the tremble in his jaw, the crack in his composure. He knew it was wrong, but he said nothing. When McConnell finished, he unplugged the clippers, blew off the blades like it was just another routine day. You're free to go, he said, tossing her ID on the table like trash. Courtroom's down the hall. Arya stood slowly. Her scalp raw, her dignity bruised, but far from broken. She picked up her ID, tucked it back into her case, and walked past the two men without another word. Her stride was controlled. Every movement measured. Down the hallway, her heels echoed like thunder. She didn't take the private elevator she was cleared for. She walked in through the front doors of Courtroom 2B like everyone else. The courtroom was filling quickly, today's docket stacked with high-profile hearings, including a civil rights suit involving excessive force by local police. Reporters were already in the gallery. A few looked up at her, then quickly looked away, unsure what to make of the sight. A black woman, suit sharp, head unevenly shaved, walking with the poise of someone who belonged, even if they didn't yet understand how. The bailiff looked up and blinked. It was Thompson. He froze when he recognized her. She didn't even glance his way. Arya stepped to the side chamber where her robe hung waiting, freshly pressed. She put it on herself. No ceremony, no assistance. Just silence. Then she opened the doors from the judge's chambers and stepped onto the bench. Gasps rippled through the room. Mouths dropped, chairs scraped, eyes widened. Because the woman McConnell had shaved, manhandled, and mocked was now sitting at the highest seat in the room. Judge Arya Lane, appointed to the federal bench 2 years prior, was no longer anonymous, and the man who had assaulted her was standing just 20 feet away, jaw clenched, face pale. She didn't look at him, not yet. She simply tapped the gavel once. Court is now in session. The courtroom fell silent, because power, real power, doesn't need to announce itself. It arrives. And it changes everything. The whispers didn't stop for hours. The moment Judge Arya Lane took the bench, every soul in that courtroom felt the temperature shift. Attorneys sat straighter. Reporters fumbled for their recorders. But no one reacted quite like Officer Darren McConnell, standing frozen by the side wall, his hand brushing the grip of his holstered taser like it was some kind of anchor. He couldn't believe it. That woman, the one he shaved. The one he humiliated. She was the judge. Arya's gaze didn't flinch as she called the first case, her voice smooth but commanding. Case 274B, The People vs. Leon Chambers. Excessive force complaint. Officer McConnell, you're named in the supporting evidence. You are not to approach this bench or make any further public statements regarding this courtroom. Darren stepped back involuntarily. His partner from earlier, Officer Thompson, sat quietly at the rear of the gallery. His face said everything: regret, fear, and something deeper: shame. The plaintiff's lawyer, a seasoned civil rights attorney named Jasmine Cross, rose with a sense of renewed power. She glanced at Arya, a flicker of recognition flashing across her eyes, then turned to address the court. Your Honor, in light of today's events, I'd like to file a supplemental motion regarding Officer McConnell's pattern of racial misconduct, including an incident that occurred just this morning, off the record. Gasps stirred across the room. Reporters leaned forward. Arya held up a hand. That will be addressed in chambers. Court will recess for 15 minutes. She stepped down from the bench, walking past McConnell. She didn't acknowledge him, didn't give him even a glance. But her silence cut sharper than any accusation. The power dynamic had flipped, and everyone in the room felt it. As she reached her chambers, her assistant, Denise, a bright young clerk with piercing eyes, met her at the door. "Judge Lane, was that really him?" "Yes," Arya said quietly. "That was the man." Denise looked horrified. "Do you want to report it now? Call the press? I can contact—" "No." Arya walked in and closed the door behind her. "Not yet." Back inside, McConnell was already pulling out his phone, pacing the hallway outside the courtroom. "I don't care what you saw. She didn't say she was a judge," he hissed into the phone. "No one said she was a judge." Pause. "Don't tell me about protocol, Jerry. You think I'd have shaved her head if I knew who she was?" Another pause. He pressed the phone harder against his ear. "What do you mean Internal Affairs is coming? You can't be serious. I was doing my job." In the gallery, whispers turned to murmurs. Everyone had seen what just happened, and the buzz spread like wildfire through the courthouse halls. By noon, word was already climbing up the ladder. Judicial misconduct, unlawful detainment, assault. In her chambers, Arya sat in front of her mirror, gazing at the uneven stubble left behind. For the first time since it happened, she let herself feel it. The sting. The rage, the violation, and the memory. That room. That sound. The clippers buzzing. The look of satisfaction on McConnell's face. The sick pleasure in his smirk when he yanked the scarf off her head. She had kept it together. She had survived worse before, but this was different. This was personal. Her fingers hovered over the phone. One call to the U.S. Marshals. One call to the Judicial Ethics Board. One press statement. But not yet. Not until the truth could be used to do something bigger. Her clerk knocked on the door. "Judge Lane, Jasmine Cross is requesting a sidebar. She says it's urgent." "Let her in." Jasmine stepped in with purpose, but also a note of respect. "Your Honor, I know this isn't procedure, but what McConnell did to you this morning, it matters. I'm aware. I can file a formal report, an affidavit. We have security cameras in that hallway. They were turned off." Jasmine's jaw tightened. "Then let's subpoena every person who was on duty. Let's make this case about more than just one man with a badge." Arya looked up. "Go on." Jasmine leaned closer, voice low. "What if we expose the whole system? Not just McConnell. The training, the culture, the cover-ups. We get the community involved. Use this case as a turning point." Arya studied her. "And you'd do that knowing what it could cost you?" "I've spent a decade fighting in this courthouse. You're the first judge I've ever seen walk in here looking like someone my daughter could look up to." That means something. For the first time that day, Arya smiled. Not wide, but real. Then let's make sure it means something to everyone else too. Outside, McConnell's phone buzzed again. He looked down at the message from Internal Affairs. Meeting scheduled. Mandatory. Monday morning. His hands began to shake. Because suddenly, the man who thought he held all the power had none left. And the woman he tried to break. She was just getting started. The next morning, the courthouse was buzzing before sunrise. News trucks lined the sidewalks, camera crews setting up outside the steps like they were preparing for a verdict in a national scandal. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with something different than usual. It wasn't just legal tension. It was anticipation, like the city knew something big was unfolding behind those marble walls. Judge Arya Lane entered through the side entrance, as she always did. No pomp. No entourage. But this time, even the security officers who usually avoided eye contact stood up straighter. One of them, a younger officer named Marquez, held the door open and nodded at her. "Morning, Your Honor." She paused. Thank you, Officer Marquez. His voice dropped. We heard what happened. She didn't respond. Just kept walking. But that acknowledgement, that shift, it meant something. In her chambers, Aria reviewed the overnight reports. The incident with Officer Darren McConnell was now officially under investigation by Internal Affairs. But more alarming, an anonymous tip had been sent to her office containing internal memos, documents showing that McConnell had been disciplined 3 separate times over the past 5 years for aggressive behavior toward black civilians. None of it had made it past his supervisor. She flipped through the pages, reading each redacted line with growing anger. One report mentioned a teenage boy held in a holding cell for 5 hours because McConnell didn't like his tone. Another described a woman dragged from her car during a traffic stop when she refused to unlock her phone. No charges were filed. No action taken. There it was again. Pattern. Protection and silence. Denise entered quietly, holding her phone. Judge, I think you should see this. She handed over the phone. A video was playing, grainy, shaky, clearly taken from a phone hidden in a purse. It showed the hallway just outside the security checkpoint. McConnell, the moment he grabbed Aria's arm, the moment he shoved her into the screening room. No audio, but the aggression was unmistakable. Aria stared at the screen. Who leaked this? Don't know, Denise said. It showed up on a local forum, but it's spreading, already hit Twitter. Aria handed the phone back. That's going to change everything. Down in the courtroom, Jasmine Cross was already waiting. She stood alone at the plaintiff's table, her back straight, her presence calm but electric. When Aria entered, the room stood again, not just out of habit, but with a different kind of respect now. As she sat, she noticed McConnell in the gallery. He was in uniform, but this time, he didn't look proud. He looked cornered. Pale, sweating. The first witness took the stand, a young man named Elijah Hartwell. 19. College freshman. He described the night he was pulled from his car at gunpoint after a taillight ticket. The officer? McConnell. He said he was forced onto the ground, face scraped against asphalt, while McConnell laughed and told him, "Next time, keep your eyes forward, boy." Jasmine asked gently, "Did you report the incident?" "I tried," Elijah said. "Filed a complaint. They said there wasn't enough evidence." "And what happened after?" "I stopped driving, started walking everywhere." A silence fell. Aria's jaw tightened. "Thank you," Jasmine said. After the witness stepped down, McConnell leaned over to whisper to the officer beside him. "They're stacking the deck. This is political." The officer didn't reply. In a break before the next witness, Aria retreated to her chambers. She needed space. But just as she closed the door, Denise entered again. This time, not with news, with a face that said something was wrong. "There's someone here to see you," Denise said. "Who?" Denise hesitated. "Your mother." Aria froze. She hadn't seen her mother in almost 2 years. Not since the fallout after Aria took the federal appointment and declined to speak at a church rally her mother helped organize. "Send her in," Aria said quietly. The door opened. Evelyn Lane walked in, tall, elegant, hair pinned up, eyes sharp as ever. She wore a gray coat and carried a satchel that looked older than both of them. "You didn't think I'd come," Evelyn said. "No," Aria replied. "I didn't. I saw the video. I figured." Evelyn sat down across from her daughter. "They think you're a hero." "I'm not." "You're wrong about that." Aria folded her hands. "Why are you really here?" Evelyn paused. To remind you of what you told me when you first got that bench. That you weren't just going to serve justice. You were going to change how it looked, how it sounded. Arya exhaled. You're doing that now, Evelyn said softly. But you need to remember something. They're going to come for you harder than ever. They're going to twist this. They'll say you're biased, emotional, dangerous. I know. Then you'd better be ready, Evelyn said. Because the moment you start winning, they'll fight like they're losing everything. They were quiet for a moment. Then Arya stood. I'm ready. When court resumed, the defense attorney stood and requested a sidebar. He was a slick man named Grayson Burke, known for his smooth voice and ruthless depositions. Your Honor, he said, in light of the publicity surrounding this incident, we'd like to file a motion for recusal. On what grounds? Public perception of bias. Your Honor's personal experience may cloud impartiality. Arya looked him dead in the eye. You're suggesting that because I was assaulted, I am no longer capable of doing my job? I'm suggesting the court appears compromised. You're wrong, she said. This court has been compromised for years. I'm just the one finally cleaning it up. He didn't respond. Motion denied, and with that, the case continued. But the message was clear. Arya Lane wasn't just holding court. She was taking back every room they'd once tried to keep her out of. The courtroom was still buzzing when the afternoon session resumed. The hallway outside echoed with murmurs from reporters, attorneys, and community leaders. What had started as a civil case was now a spotlight shining deep into the cracks of the entire department, and all eyes were on Judge Arya Lane. Officer Darren McConnell sat rigid in the gallery, lips pressed thin, trying to hide the storm churning beneath his uniform. He watched Jasmine Cross rise to call her next witness, a former officer named Marcus Rains. There was a shift in the air. Marcus walked with a limp, his badge long gone, but his presence carried weight. Arya studied his body language carefully. He didn't look like a man with a grudge. He looked like a man who had waited too long to speak. Jasmine approached. Mr. Rains, can you state your connection to the Metropolitan Police Department? I served for 12 years, he said, voice gravelly but steady. Mostly patrol. Retired 2 years ago after a back injury in the field. And during those years, were you acquainted with Officer McConnell? He gave a slight nod. We rode the same beat for a while. Can you tell the court about any incidents you witnessed involving him and civilians? Rains shifted in his seat, clearly uneasy. I once saw him body slam a 16-year-old kid for jaywalking. When I stepped in to de-escalate, he pulled me aside and said, "Don't make me choose sides, Marcus." I knew what that meant. Did you report it? I did. To our sergeant. The next day I found sugar in my gas tank and a letter in my locker that said, "Keep your mouth shut, rat." A collective breath sucked in from the courtroom. Rains continued, voice rising. After that, I started documenting everything. Names, dates, badge numbers. I thought someday someone would care. Jasmine stepped closer. Do you still have those records? He reached into a worn briefcase and held up a notebook. Right here. Haven't let it out of my sight since 2018. McConnell's jaw clenched. His lawyer leaned in, whispering furiously. Arya motioned for the notebook. It was passed to the bailiff, then to her hands. She flipped through. Dozens of entries, handwritten, each one a small act of rebellion against silence. She looked up. Thank you, Mr. Rains. The court will examine this thoroughly. As the former officer stepped down, McConnell stood abruptly. This is a circus, he muttered, loud enough for half the room to hear. Arya raised an eyebrow. Officer McConnell, if you'd like to be heard, you'll be sworn in like everyone else. but outbursts in my courtroom won't be tolerated. He sat down slowly, his face red but silent. During a recess, Arya returned to her chambers. She leaned against the desk, staring at the notebook from Rains. There was something else. An envelope tucked into the back. She opened it. Inside were printed emails, correspondence between McConnell and Sergeant Blake Conway, filled with jokes laced in racism, coded language, and conversations mocking citizens who'd filed complaints. One thread even included photos of detainees with dehumanizing captions. Arya stared at the signature line. "Keep the streets clean." Her hand trembled with fury. Not from shock, from recognition. This wasn't just one bad officer. It was a network, a machine, a shield that protected men like McConnell because they were useful in keeping people like her out of power. Denise entered again, hesitant. "There's someone here asking to speak with you privately." Arya didn't turn. "Who is it?" "He says his name is Evan Richards." "Investigative journalist. Said he has information that might help." Arya nodded. "Send him in." The man who walked in was mid-30s, white, with a thick file tucked under one arm and a camera bag slung over his shoulder. "Your Honor," he said quietly. "Sorry to drop in unannounced." "What do you have?" "I've been following Officer McConnell's career for the last 6 months. I didn't know you were the woman in the video. But I've got sealed IA files, whistleblower statements, and something bigger." He placed a photo on her desk. This man, Blake Conway, was promoted to deputy chief 6 months ago. Since then, 10 formal complaints against McConnell and others have disappeared. Vanished from digital records. Cover-up? Systematic and funded. I traced back donations to their union. Turns out, 2 of the donors sit on the mayor's re-election committee. Arya's breath caught. This wasn't just departmental rot. It was political decay. "How soon can you make this public?" she asked. He hesitated. "Not without protection for my source. One of them is still on the force. Get them safe. I'll take care of the rest." As he left, Arya sat alone, the evidence spread before her. Everything she'd feared. Everything she'd once promised to challenge, now laid bare, demanding action. And somewhere across town, in a quiet precinct, Blake Conway opened his email to find a subpoena, signed with her name at the bottom. The judge they thought they could silence was just getting started. The next morning, the courthouse felt different. Not quieter, never that, but sharper, more charged. Like something beneath the marble floors was shifting. Judge Arya Lane stepped into her courtroom with a renewed focus. Last night had been a whirlwind of red string and late phone calls, verifying what Evan Richards had given her, cross-referencing names, digging into donation trails, even contacting a federal oversight committee. She had known this wasn't just about her, but the scope of it. Now it felt massive. Jasmine Cross was already at her table, her laptop open, fingers flying across the keys. Arya noted the subtle tension in her shoulders. "Everything all right, Ms. Cross?" she asked as she took her seat. Jasmine stood. "Your Honor, I've just received a motion to dismiss filed by the defense." "On what grounds?" Jasmine's lips tightened. "They're claiming my client fabricated the abuse, that the video circulating online was edited for impact, and the witness testimonies are all emotionally motivated." Arya raised her brows. "And do they offer any evidence?" "No." "Just speculation." "Then we'll proceed." But even as she said it, Arya noticed something. McConnell wasn't in the room. Neither was his attorney, Grayson Burke. A delay tactic? Or something worse? The bailiff approached quietly and handed her a slip of paper. It was from Internal Affairs. "Your Honor," the bailiff whispered, You're going to want to read that. She unfolded the note. Her face darkened. McConnell had filed a formal complaint against her, claimed she had jeopardized judicial neutrality, and engaged in a personal vendetta under the guise of justice. It was a direct attempt to discredit her and delay proceedings. Worse, it had been fast-tracked by someone high up in IA. Backroom maneuvering, pressure, retaliation. Jasmine leaned in. Are they coming for your robe now too? Arya didn't respond. She didn't have to. The courtroom doors opened. Grayson Burke entered, alone, looking flustered. He approached the bench without even glancing at Jasmine. Your Honor, I regret to inform the court that my client is currently unavailable for today's session. Unavailable, Arya echoed flatly. You mean missing? Officer McConnell has, according to his union representative, checked himself into a wellness facility as of 7:43 this morning, for mental health reasons. The courtroom buzzed with quiet whispers. Arya tapped her gavel once. While the court respects mental health concerns, I also know a tactical retreat when I see one. She turned to Jasmine. Continue with the next witness. The next witness was unexpected. A young woman named Destiny Monroe stepped up to the stand. She wore a simple sweater, her natural hair braided back tight, no makeup. But her voice was powerful. Controlled. I was arrested by Officer McConnell 2 years ago, she said, for resisting arrest. But the truth is, I was filming him choke a man on the street. Did you submit the footage? Jasmine asked. I tried. The officer took my phone. Claimed it was evidence. I never saw it again. Did you file a complaint? I did. Twice. Then one morning, I walked outside to find the words, "You're next," spray painted on my car. The courtroom was silent. And what happened with your case? Jasmine asked. I pled guilty to a misdemeanor. Just to avoid jail? I lost my job 3 days later. Why come forward now? Destiny looked at Arya. Because I saw you, she said. On that video, and I realized it's not just about survival, it's about stopping it. Arya held her gaze. That moment, raw and unfiltered, cut deeper than any legal argument. Outside, the press swarmed. Headlines had already started circulating. One from a major outlet read, "Judge who was assaulted by cop now uncovering department-wide cover-up." That afternoon, Arya received a call from her longtime friend and fellow federal judge, Marcus Reed. They're whispering your name all over D.C., he said. Good whispers or bad? Both. Some are calling you brave. Others are preparing to challenge your seat. Let them. He paused. They'll try to paint this as bias. I know. Then you better make damn sure every step you take is airtight. Because you're not just exposing a man anymore. You're threatening the system that protects him. Later that night, Arya sat alone in her chambers. The notebook from Marcus Raines still lay on her desk. Beside it, the emails, the subpoena, the new list of names from Evan. But what caught her eye now was something smaller. A sealed envelope addressed to her in careful handwriting. No return address. She opened it. Inside was a photograph. It was her. Taken the night McConnell dragged her into the screening room, the moment he held the razor to her scalp. But from a different angle. Hidden. Secret. There was only one line written on the back. They know who you are, and they're watching. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. That night, Arya couldn't sleep. She sat by the window of her apartment, city lights flickering beyond the glass like distant sparks of chaos. The photo lay on her desk, and the words on the back echoed in her mind. They know who you are, and they're watching. It wasn't paranoia anymore. Someone had been there that night. Someone had captured the exact moment McConnell humiliated her and kept it hidden. Until now. And now they wanted her to know they were close. She picked up her phone and called Evan Richards. "I got something," she said without preamble. An anonymous photo. Same scene from the station, different angle. Someone else was watching that night. "Are you sure it's not a scare tactic?" "It's a message. And not a subtle one." Evan sighed on the other end. "Then it means they're getting desperate." That morning, the courthouse felt like a siege. Reporters packed the sidewalks. Protesters held signs, some in support, some calling her biased, others just angry and looking for a target. Security was doubled. Armed officers stood outside the entrance, silent but present. As Aria entered the courtroom, Denise pulled her aside. "We've received a federal injunction," she whispered. "McConnell's attorney has filed a motion to have you removed from the bench due to personal involvement." Aria's jaw tightened. Of course they did. And there's more. The DA's office has been pressured to open an investigation into your conduct during the initial incident. Aria paused. "So now I'm the one under review?" They're flipping the board. Inside the courtroom, Jasmine was already arguing with the stand-in judge assigned for the procedural hearing, Judge Leon Mays, a man Aria knew too well. A career politician, safe, apolitical, which also meant he was a master at self-preservation. "Your Honor," Jasmine said firmly, "this is nothing more than retaliation. Judge Lane is not the plaintiff. She is the presiding judge, and her professionalism has been unquestionable." Mays gave her a flat look. "Even so, public perception matters. This court is not immune to scrutiny." Aria stood, calm but sharp. "Then let the scrutiny begin. If the defense wants to paint this as bias, let's show them what transparency looks like." "I will not recuse myself unless ordered to by the state Supreme Court." "Do you understand the political cost of continuing this case?" Mays asked her directly. Aria met his eyes without flinching. "Yes. I also understand the cost of walking away." Silence. Then, slowly, Mays relented. "Proceed. But know the eyes watching are not only the public's." Later that afternoon, Jasmine called a surprise witness. A woman named Lila Pruitt, who had filed a complaint against McConnell 5 years ago. Her file had vanished from department records. "What did Officer McConnell do to you?" Jasmine asked gently. Lila, mid-30s, spoke with a quiet voice full of trembling steel. "I was pulled over for a broken taillight. He made me step out of the car, asked me if I was hiding drugs in my hair, then he laughed and told me I looked like a damn bush." The courtroom held its breath. "He pulled out scissors and cut a chunk of my hair right there on the shoulder of the highway." I cried. I begged him to stop, but he just walked back to his cruiser and drove off. Jasmine nodded, steady. "Did you try to report it?" "I did. They said there was no body cam footage, said my file couldn't be found." "I thought I was crazy, that maybe it didn't matter." Aria's fingers curled slightly around the armrest of her bench, and then Lila looked up. "But then I saw the video, of you, and I realized they do this to all of us. Especially when they think no one will believe us." Jasmine stepped aside. No further questions. McConnell's replacement attorney, since Burke had conveniently taken leave, stood but didn't cross-examine. He knew better than to poke a flame with gasoline. As Lila stepped down, Aria took a breath. She could feel the shift in the room. The tide was turning. Later that night, Jasmine and Aria met privately in her chambers. Jasmine closed the door behind her and dropped a flash drive on the desk. Got this from a clerk in internal affairs. He said to give it to you. Off the record. What is it? Audio. A conversation between Blake Conway and the mayor's legal aid. They're discussing scrubbing complaint records and keeping you contained. Arya plugged in the drive. Static at first. Then voices. She's not just a judge. She's a symbol now. Exactly why we need to make her look unstable. Pull up that sealed record from her law school. Anything we can twist. That's dangerous. What if it backfires? It won't. The public's memory is short. But the machine is patient. Arya stared at the screen, her face unreadable. The words didn't surprise her. But hearing them out loud, the calculation in their voices, made something settle in her chest like ice. They're not going to stop, Jasmine said quietly. No, Arya replied, but neither are we. Outside, the courthouse loomed dark under a cloudy sky. But inside that chamber, beneath the weight of decades of silence, two women plotted a new kind of justice. And somewhere across town, Blake Conway picked up his phone and listened to a voice that rattled him. She has the audio, it said. She's coming. By the time the courthouse doors opened the next morning, the building felt like it was pulsing with tension. Officers in uniform flanked the entryway. News vans lined the streets, and crowds of protesters, some holding signs of support, others spewing doubt, gathered behind the barricades. Inside, Judge Arya Lane walked the halls like a woman carrying a storm in her chest. The leaked audio had gone viral overnight. It aired on national television and spread across social media like wildfire. Clips of Blake Conway discussing how to smear her reputation were paired side by side with video stills of her being humiliated in the precinct. The contrast was damning. The nation wasn't just watching anymore. They were choosing sides. Inside the courtroom, Jasmine looked up as Arya entered. You ready for this? She asked. No, Arya replied honestly, but I'm doing it anyway. The courtroom was packed. Among the crowd, Arya spotted new faces. Civil rights attorneys, state bar officials, federal observers. What had started as a misconduct hearing had grown into something bigger, something symbolic. She banged the gavel once. This court is now in session. Jasmine rose, a folder in hand. Your Honor, I request to submit new evidence. A subpoenaed internal memo from the mayor's office showing that high-ranking officials knew about multiple abuse complaints against Officer McConnell and actively worked to bury them. She handed it to the clerk, who passed it to Arya. The document was brief but explosive. Names, dates, signatures. A trail of coordinated silence stretching back years. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Arya turned to the defense attorney. Would you like to respond? The man stood awkwardly, clearly out of his depth. Your Honor, I request time to review this document. You'll have until this afternoon. We proceed in the meantime. And proceed they did. The next witness was unexpected, a former officer named Anthony Vega, once McConnell's partner. He looked nervous, fingers twitching as he swore the oath. I left the force 2 years ago, he began, eyes low. Couldn't take the culture anymore. What we did to Judge Lane that night, it wasn't an isolated thing. It was routine. That precinct had a way of checking certain people, especially if they looked like they didn't belong. You were there? Jasmine asked. I was in the room next door. I heard it all. I didn't stop it. I should have. Why come forward now? Vega's voice broke. Because I've got a daughter, and I don't want her to think silence is strength. The courtroom fell into a long silence. Then a murmur of respect. But the peace didn't last. Just as Vega stepped down, a courtroom aide rushed in with a sealed envelope. Your Honor, urgent delivery. Arya opened it. Inside was a single sheet, a federal order. Effective immediately, the Department of Justice would be launching a formal investigation into the entire 12th precinct. Multiple officers, including current Police Chief Blake Conway, had been placed on administrative leave. Internal Affairs had seized their records. Jasmine stood frozen. This is happening! Arya didn't speak, but a fire had lit behind her eyes. Before recess, Arya addressed the courtroom. Let the record show that justice doesn't just happen inside this room. It begins when those in power are willing to be held accountable. It thrives when silence is broken. This case is not about vengeance. It's about visibility, about truth. And today, the truth is no longer buried. Then the twist. As the courtroom emptied for the midday recess, Arya returned to her chambers and found someone waiting. Detective Colleen Davis. The woman who had originally ignored Arya's pleas the night of her arrest. I wanted to speak to you off the record, Davis said. There's something you don't know. Arya didn't invite her to sit. Start talking. Davis took a breath. That night, I wasn't supposed to be on duty. Conway called me in personally. Said he needed a female officer present for optics. He never told me who you were. When I realized, I asked him why you weren't booked properly. He told me you were nobody, just another mouthy suspect. Arya's jaw tightened. But here's the thing, Davis continued. I found a second copy of your arrest file, hidden, not in the system. Handwritten, tucked away in an old evidence box. That's how I knew something was wrong. She slid a flash drive across the desk. Every internal file. Every hidden complaint. Every witness Conway silenced. I copied everything before IA seized the servers. Because I believe you now. I believe all of them. Arya stared at the drive. If this is real? It is, Davis said. I'm willing to testify, on the record. Outside, the winds of justice were shifting, but inside, the reckoning had only just begun. The courtroom was dead silent. Every seat was filled, every eye locked forward as Judge Arya Lane stood behind the bench, not just as the presiding judge, but as a woman who had survived humiliation, conspiracy, and systemic betrayal, and had chosen to fight back. A full federal tribunal was present. Blake Conway, now in an orange jumpsuit, sat flanked by two federal marshals. His expression was hollow. Gone was the arrogant smirk, replaced by a twitching jaw and darting eyes. The once feared chief of police was now just another man waiting to be judged. Jasmine stood confidently at the center of the room. Your Honor, the evidence is undeniable. Internal Affairs confirms nearly 36 complaints buried under his command. The Department of Justice has verified falsified reports, tampered files, and coordinated smear campaigns aimed at silencing victims. This wasn't just negligence. It was deliberate abuse of power. She turned, eyes locking with Conway. And in Judge Lane's case, it was personal. Conway finally spoke, his voice scratchy. You think I'm the only one who ever did this? You think I'm the system? I was doing what the system wanted. I just said it out loud. The gallery stirred. Arya leaned forward, calm but cutting. No, Mr. Conway, you didn't just speak it. You orchestrated it, you enforced it, and you relished it. That's what makes you dangerous. The federal prosecutor stood. Your Honor, the government recommends full prosecution to the extent of the law. Civil rights violations, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and multiple counts of official misconduct. Arya nodded slowly. Motion granted. A buzz moved through the courtroom. Conway hung his head. The chains at his wrists clinked as the marshals led him out. But Arya wasn't done. She rose from the bench, stepping down onto the courtroom floor for the first time during the trial. "I have something to say before this court adjourns." The crowd stilled again. "When I walked into that precinct, I was just another black woman to them. My degree didn't matter, my title didn't matter. My humanity didn't matter. They stripped me of my identity, literally, and they laughed while doing it. And for a long time, I thought I had to bury that moment. Because showing pain, showing trauma, it felt like weakness." She looked around. "But I was wrong. Speaking it was power. Fighting it was justice, and refusing to disappear was survival." She looked to the young women in the crowd, the ones holding signs that read, "We believe you," the ones who had DM'd her stories late at night, and the ones who would never make the headlines. "This isn't just about me, it's about every voice that was ignored. Every case that was dismissed, every woman who was told to sit down and shut up." Her voice steadied. "We're not going anywhere." Thunderous applause erupted. People stood. Some cried. Jasmine wiped her cheek without shame. Later that evening, Arya walked alone through the courthouse corridors. The building was empty now, quiet, but for the echoes of everything that had happened within its walls. She reached her chambers and paused. On her desk, someone had left a single note. In messy handwriting, it read, "Because of you, I applied to law school. Keep fighting. Lila." She smiled softly, the weight in her chest finally beginning to lift. Outside, the city breathed, brighter, louder, awake, and inside those halls, the system was no longer sleeping. To everyone who's ever been silenced, overlooked, or underestimated, this story is for you. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it made you feel something, then join us. Subscribe to the channel, share these voices, and help make sure the world keeps listening. Justice doesn't begin with power, it begins with courage. And sometimes all it takes is one voice refusing to be quiet.